Some of you may have noticed that after the anthem, Kathy Chehovic left. She knew what the sermon was, and she said, "I gotta get out of here." She told me that ahead of time. No, actually, she's going to Knoll Heights today to lead a worship time there. And she said, "Well, can I do that?" And I said, "Of course. We need to lift that up as one of the ministries we do every month." And she's always looking for people to help her on that. So I wanted to lift that up especially, and it's one of the gifts that I'm just grateful for here in our congregation. So let me start off with a question. How many of you would consider yourselves sports fans? All right. You know, for me, I don't know how to answer that question. Because I find it difficult to stay engaged with almost any sport that I'm watching on TV. It's just too little. And we've yet to invest in one of those TVs that's as big as the living room. You know? It's just like a little box. And it's really hard to stay with that, for me at least. The action just seems too slow. It's shrunk down to the size of the TV. There are too many commercials. There's all those things that happen in there. But if I go to a live game, I can really get excited. I can get caught up in that. I can feel the emotions. I can actually get vocal and cheer a little bit. You know, and it doesn't matter what level it is, what age group it is. You know, this past fall I went to several soccer games, and I could feel my heart pounding because my grandson was a goalie, and it's really nerve-wracking. My son did the same thing. He wanted to be goalie, and it's like you see the ball coming down the field, it's like, no! You know, just go away. And then when they saved the goal, you know, they saved it, you know, that was fantastic. You know, I don't care whether it's football or soccer or baseball or lacrosse or basketball, whatever. I can get caught up while I'm there and live. But I want you to think about being someplace. Let's say you go to a stadium, football stadium, of any, and you all just sit there nice and polite. And you're sitting there with a whole group of people, hands folded on your lap. You don't say a word. You don't do anything. How boring would that be? You know, part of the game is showing the joy. You know, if you just sat there, you know, maybe we should try it someplace. We'll go to a game, we'll all sit there nice and politely, and at the end of the game, we'll all stand up and give a nice little golf clap. It would just lose everything, wouldn't it? You know, there's something about being around other people. Cheering on a team. It's amazing, though, to me how worked up we can get about a sporting event. But somehow within the church, we've lost the ability to be so joyful like that. When it comes to being grateful to God for all the amazing things that God is doing every single day. Somehow in the properness of gathered worship experiences, particularly in our traditions now, we don't express a whole lot of enthusiasm. We've convinced ourselves that we can and should do this quietly. After all, God knows our thoughts, and God knows our hearts. Now, I don't disagree that God knows our thoughts and our hearts. But we do need to ask why, with all the blessings we receive, we can be so reserved about them. Not only letting God know, but others know the joy we have. Perhaps we may be like that third-grade teacher who received a note from her students, from one of her students, that said, "If you're so happy on the inside, why don't you send a message to your face?" So let me ask this. Would any of us, have you ever been accused of being too joyful about the gifts God has given us? Probably not. It's just kind of the way it is. But I look back at the scriptures, and I look particularly at the 100th Psalm, and I see something different. Now, this is time for true confession. The 100th Psalm was the first psalm I ever memorized. And that was in first grade. I started school up through, I think, the end of second grade. We still read the Bible every morning. We did the Lord's Prayer, the Pledge of Allegiance. We attempted to sing some patriotic song, everything except the Star Spangled Banner, because we were too young and we could never memorize that. But we would do that as our morning exercises. And in first grade, we weren't like first graders now who kind of go in being able to read at least some. My class, I guess we were just not quite there yet. But so we had to memorize a song. And we were given two options. It was either the 23rd Psalm or the 100th Psalm. And I chose the 100th Psalm for a very deep theological reason. It was shorter. It was easier. You know? Take the easy way out, I thought, especially this is God's Word. Let's do it easy. You know? But I remember that psalm. And as I started to think about today, and realize that this psalm was a psalm for the Hebrew people that really laid out what worship should be like. It's a scriptural model that we see for joyful expression. And this is what the Hebrew people did. Once a year, they would come to Jerusalem, at least once a year. They would come to Jerusalem for a festival to offer sacrifices. This is a picture of what they believe the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, looked like in Jerusalem. And they came there to offer their sacrifices and worship God. And 9 out of 150 Psalms specifically encourage the Hebrew people to make a joyful noise. And 43 different Psalms celebrate joy. Kaufman Kohler states in the Jewish Encyclopedia that no language has so many words for joy and rejoicing as does the Hebrew language. In the Old Testament, listen to this, there are 13 Hebrew roots found in 27 different words that are used primarily for expressing some aspect of joy or joyful participation in worship. Hebrew religious ritual demonstrated God as the source of joy, and they shared that with one another, and they shared that with God, in contrast to other faiths of the East, where God was to be feared, keep God far away from us, and worship often was just to appease the anger of a God. Here were the Hebrew people rejoicing and celebrating. That is our tradition. But then I started wondering, maybe this was a reminder to the Hebrew people, more than just a celebration, but a reminder to remember as they came to worship who they were worshiping and what they were worshiping. Because as they came to the temple, they would have seen that, but they also would have seen what is viewed here in the model, and that's Solomon's temple, or Solomon's palace. It stood right next to Solomon's temple. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, the temple would have gone up there, but the temple was 60 cubits by 20 cubits and 30 cubits high, according to 1 Kings. I know, what's a cubit? About that long. And was supported by great cedars of Lebanon. It took 7 years to build it. Solomon's palace, which stood right by it, measured 100 by 50 cubits and 30 cubits high, with at least 3 other structures, measuring almost the same size as the temple. It took 13 years to build. So maybe part of the reminder was as people came to worship God, they would see these two structures side by side and be reminded that it is God who we worship and not the king. Perhaps they needed to know who was God and who was not. And one of the songs I sang is Psalm 100. Psalm 100 proclaims many things in its short verses. But one of the things that it talks about in terms of worship is action. We do something. We just don't think about it. And there are four things. I'm going to put them in reverse order than how they appear in the psalm. The first is you need to know and affirm that God is the God of all. That it is God whom we worship, not the king, not other things, but it is God that we worship. And we celebrate that. And in celebrating that, we come into God's presence. How can we be in relationship with someone if we never come into their presence? It's really hard. Even in this day and age of Facebook and other, I know Facebook's old now, compared to Instagram and other things over there. If you don't know the person on the other end, you just kind of friend somebody. You really don't know them. You know a little bit about them. How do we know God but to come into the presence of God? The third thing is we serve the Lord with gladness. It's not just about thinking. It's not just about having something in our heart. It's also about doing. And we serve God as we serve one another. And we do that with gladness. Now I know that sometimes when we serve, we may start the day out thinking like, whoa, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I said I would show up, and I will, but I'm not feeling very glad about it. But inevitably, if we are doing something, if we're serving God as we're serving our neighbor, we get caught up in that. And we find joy and gladness in that. And think about those whom we serve. That as we serve with gladness, that brings joy into their lives. Imagine if someone came to help you with something, and all you heard was moaning, groaning, and complaining. Probably, I know how I would feel. Why don't you just leave? This is such a downer. I'll do it myself if it's such a burden. But when there's joy there, it lifts the spirit of someone else. And the fourth action is how the psalm starts. Make a joyful noise. Four actions that proclaim gratitude for all the blessings we have received. Gratitude and being grateful for everything God gives to us. I really believe that when we can express our gratitude to God, it opens us up to sharing real gratitude with one another. I invite each of you to take a moment to think about who has blessed you. Because these persons are God's gift. Are we grateful for the gifts of those who have blessed us in life? How do they know that we are grateful? Or do we just assume that they know that? Because after all, if we're in a relationship, they should know what we think, right? So I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. And I ask why? Just because. I have a hard enough time reading my own mind, let alone reading anybody else's. And we can't be mind readers. We express gratitude to others. We sometimes do that by what we do, and often by what we say. And gratitude is so important. Whether or not somebody receives it in the same way, if we express it that way, it can actually be contagious. There's a story that's told of a wealthy man who was in the habit of giving his father unique gifts because his father was so important to him. One year, he gave him hang gliding lessons. Another year, he found a rare autographed record collection by his father's favorite singer. And each year he tried to outdo what had come the year before. Money didn't seem to be an object. But one year he was really stuck, and he heard about this South American bird, kind of, I guess it was like a parrot, who could speak 5 languages. They called him a translator. And the bird could even sing his father's favorite song, kind of, as a bird would sing. The talented bird, though, cost more than $10,000. But he felt it was worth every penny because of the gratitude he felt. This would be the gift his dad would never forget. And so he sent it to him. A couple days after his birthday, he called his dad and said, "Dad, how did you like the bird?" And his father said, "It was delicious." You know, we can be grateful, and we can show our gratitude, and whether somebody gets it fully or not, is that important? God does get it, though. And God asks us to be grateful for others as well. Now, today I'm going to ask you to consider doing something that I have never done in 42 years of ministry. How many knows what that is? Okay? You know, I hear a lot of people say, you know, you come to church, put your cell phone away, turn it off, or whatever. I'm going to say you can take it out. It doesn't have to be right now, but between now and the end of worship, I'm going to invite you to not only take out your phone, but to hit that button there with your text messages. And send somebody a text message. If you have your phone on you right now, do it as soon as you can when you get out of worship. And tell them you're grateful. Thank them for being there. You know, if you want to send them an emoji, send them an emoji. I don't care, just make it appropriate. And tell somebody that you are grateful for them. And you can do it right now in worship. In fact, I've been thinking that we may do this in the future, which I know may rub some people the wrong way, but, you know, what would it be like if we lifted somebody up in prayer and we actually texted them during worship and said, "We prayed for you today." And they knew immediately that our church was praying for them. You know, my feeling is this: a cell phone is just a tool. What do you do with it? That's the question. And maybe there's some things we could do with it that could let people know then and now that we are grateful for their lives, that we are thankful for them. Because all those people who are important to us are gifts from God. All that we have, all that we are, is a gift. And it's a blessing that deserves our response, a thankful response, to make joyful noises however we can do it. Perhaps our gift isn't going to be to sing a joyful song. Although, as I said before, and I will say again, God gave you the voice. God should have to listen to it. But we need to share that. This week, we're going to gather at our Thanksgiving tables. And let's not forget all the gifts that we've received, including the people who we gather with. And I'm going to make a challenge to you as a congregation, that your joyfulness will be seen by others as much as the joy you might have in watching a football game that same day. Because don't the gifts of God deserve to be celebrated? And the gifts we remember and that come with us throughout our lives tend not to be the tangible ones, but the relationships of the people who we know and whom we love.